Lockdown, Chapter 26, page 185. So you got funded? No, I did not get funded, Miss Robinson, Miss Rossetti said. I'm just doing the job that I am scheduled to do. This is the second group meeting we've had this month, Play went on. And with your kind of permission, sir, we will continue, Miss Rossetti said. Yes, ma'am. Play was wearing a half smile like he owned it, and slouching in his chair with his legs stretched out in front of him. There was a new girl in the group, and she was fine as she wanted to be. She looked a little Spanish, with dark hair and eyes, but I wasn't sure. In our last session, we discussed what made us afraid, Miss Rossetti said, looking around the room. This time, I want to know what each of you feels you can do to make someone else happy. And we'll start with you, Miss Robinson, Mr. Robinson. I think your first name is Eddie? I let people I like call me Play. What shall I call you? Miss Rossetti asked. That all depends on how attracted to me you are, Play said. If you think me and you can be... You can start, Mr. Robinson, Miss Rossetti said, her voice rising. What do you think you could do to make someone else happy? I could make my parents happy if I got a good job, Play said. Maybe tighten up a gig with the post office, 9 to 5. They would dig that big time. That's a good observation, Miss Rossetti said. You show a very good understanding of what someone else feels and thinks. How about you, Deepak? You want to run with the ball? My parents would be happy if I became an engineer, Toon said. I wouldn't be as good as an engineer as my brother, but that would make them happy, I think. Very good. Paola? She was speaking to the new girl. My parents would be happy if I let my grandmother adopt my son, Paola said. If she adopted him legally, then she would get ADC and she would be eligible for Section 8 housing on her own. Plus, she could get some startup money from Family Services to help her start up with her own place. And they even speak Spanish down there. You going to let her adopt your kid? King Kong asked. Uh-huh. Paola shook her head. I only got a 5-year bid, and if God is on my side, I can walk in 3, maybe even 2.5. Then if I can find somebody to hook up with, I can get my son back if he's in the foster system. But if the legal thing goes through with my grandmother, I can't get him back because my mom's is going to want to keep Abuela on welfare so she doesn't have to support her. That's very technical, Viola, Miss Rossetti said. Baby, you gotta know the technical stuff to survive in New York, Viola said. The other thing I could do to make my parents happy is to marry some rich dude. But that ain't hardly happening because you got to be hooked up even to meet a rich dude. You never know what love will produce, Miss Rossetti said. Mr. Wright might just come along. You're a very attractive young woman. Honey, there's so many women out there ready to satisfy any man who comes along that pretty ain't hardly cutting it. Being smart isn't enough, and being nice isn't enough, Paola said. I've got a baby and a jail record. Don't even talk to me about no Mr. Right. Miss Rossetti took a deep breath and smiled. She didn't call King Kong's name, but she kind of gestured towards his dumb butt. What would I like to do to make somebody else happy is to have my own place, you know? King Kong pulled at his crotch. Right now, not right now, but before I came up here, I was living in this shelter. Really, I was living in 2 shelters. Sometimes I stayed uptown with the folks, on 126th Street. That was okay and I could deal with it. I was also spending time downtown with the white folks because I thought that was interesting. I mean, downtown was where you had a whole different set of people. But how would you make someone else happy, Mr. Sanders? Well, I was thinking, if I had my own place, I could invite a girl up to the place and have some wine or something, or maybe order out some fried chicken and have it up there, and maybe even I could have my cousin drop by and check out my crib. Then he would see I was doing okay and he could split and think maybe he would drop by again if he was in the neighborhood. He wouldn't be falling out behind that scene, but maybe it would give him something else to do and that would make him happy. Very good, Miss Rossetti said. What I particularly like is that none of your answers are egocentric. They all consider other people. How about you, Mr. Anderson? I don't know, I said. You know you talking about what we would do and what we would say and whatnot. But if I said I would run around the park and jump up and dance and that would make my moms happy, what would you say? You would say that you can't do that because you locked up in here. If I said I would go over to Riverside Park and play 2-on-2 basketball against those white boys that come over to the park on the weekends, they can play some ball. You would say that I can't do that because I'm in jail. That's right, but there are things. Yo, let me run it, Miss Rossetti, okay? Go ahead. Okay, what I'm saying is that this isn't my world you're talking about. I can dig what you're saying about going with somebody else's feelings and what they're thinking instead of just dealing with what's on your mind, but I know there's a curtain that divides your world from mine. Because you're black, you mean? You sure jumped on that in a heartbeat, Kat said. Kat, I'm trying to figure out where Mr. Anderson is going, that's all, Miss Rossetti said. It ain't just about black and white, I said. I got this friend of mine who's white. So he was in a war and he got captured. Nothing he could do except what they told him. Then the war was over and his family didn't do nothing for him. Then he got old and ended up in a nursing home. How old is your friend? Miss Rossetti asked. About 76, maybe 77, I said. He wasn't in no war because you can't be in a war if you're that old, King Kong said. The guy he's talking about wasn't always that old, Leon said. My grandfather was in a war back in the day when he was fighting the Vietnams. There's always a war going on. Mr. Anderson? Yeah, well, getting him caught up in a war meant that he couldn't do what he thought was right, I said. And then he came out of the war and he wasn't getting on too tough. And then he got old and, like, feeble. At first he told me he was kicking it big time, being a hero to his family and getting presents and visits and all that stuff. But then, when the hammer fell, I found out that he was just scraping by. He was fronting and grunting, Kat said. Yeah, but that doesn't mean he didn't have his head together, I said. I think he had his head together, but it didn't make any difference. He couldn't make anybody else happy, and he couldn't make himself happy. Why did you become his friend? Toon asked. That doesn't make any difference, I said. It makes a difference to me, Toon said. That's because you and Toon sweet on each other, King Kong said. Me and your mama sweet on each other too, I said, but the ASPCA don't like me messing with her. Whoa, that's enough. Miss Rossetti's voice rose to the ceiling. Mr. Pugh had been sitting across from us playing solitaire on the computer, but soon as he heard Miss Rossetti's voice, he jumped up and started toward us. King Kong stood up and took a step toward me, but then he turned and looked at Mr. Pugh and sat down again. Yeah, both of us knew he didn't want any more of me. Miss Rossetti held up her hand up to keep Mr. Pugh back, and things got real quiet. Mr. Pugh had about 4 different faces. He had his normal face, which was like maybe he was lost. He had a smiling face, which was like maybe he was lost but he didn't care. He had his mad face, which looked like he wanted to kill you. And then he had this face that kind of darkened with his eyes darting around like, hey, please give me a half of an excuse to turn your ass inside out. When he got that face on, I didn't even look at him, just down at the floor. Okay, so Mr. Anderson's friend was making up parts of his life, Miss Rossetti said as she sat back down. Is that all bad? If you got a police record, it's not bad, Leon said, because the truth isn't going to help you in the real world. I don't recommend lying, Miss Rossetti started, but I do understand your point. Mr. Anderson, can you think of anything you would make that would make somebody else happy? No, but I need to because I'm going to call my sister Sunday, and I really would like to say something to make her happy. She hates me being in jail, and I hate being here away from her. So I would like to think of something to say to her that would. But I can't tell her no lies. She's only 9, right? Play asked. Yeah. Tell her you'll buy her a bracelet when you get out, he said. Girls like jewelry, and she'll like it because you bought it for her. Is she smart? Kat asked. She's my sister, ain't she? I said. Yo, bro, we're not in Harvard, Kat said. This is jail. Everybody cracked on that. Yeah, she's real smart, I said. I agree with little ears, Viola said. She can't even imagine a bracelet or look for a nice one in the stores. Little ears? Play was touching his ears. Maybe you could write a book about her life, Toon said. I think she would like that very much. Yeah, that's good thinking, I said. She'd like that. Toon smiled. The group thing ended and we went straight to dinner. I was hungry as anything, but they had cabbage, some kind of chopped up ham, and scrambled eggs. I ate the ketchup and the eggs and left the ham. For dessert, they had the same old ice cream, but this time they had potato chips instead of pound cake. Lame for days. When I get out of here, all I'm going to eat for the next 5 years is steak, Play said. How come you didn't say nothing when that girl called you little ears? I asked him. Play just grinned. I think she's trying to get with me. I hope she makes it.